a chiamarti ma non mi rispondi. Mi senti? Ok. Ok. Good afternoon. Welcome to the last Premio Cosmos digital meeting for students. Today we are going to meet Chiara Parisi, our author of the book Le gioie della, scienza, published by Bollati Boringhieri, translated by Laura Day. Welcome, Jim. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
It is going to speak with Marilù Chiofalo. Marilù, the president of the scientific council of Premio Cosmos, who is here with us today. Thank you, Frank, for being particle physics at this astroparticle physics of the University of Amsterdam. After a Master of Science at the University of National Accelerator Laboratory, the University of Padova, the Institute of Physics in Paris, l'astroparticle physics, theoretical astroparticle physicist and cosmologist.
The schedule and all the organizers, I wanted to say that we are very grateful for your time and for your presence here today. And also congratulations on your wonderful book, which I think it aligns perfectly with the goals of our initiative.
One of the best-known science communicators in Britain. He has written 12 books on popular science, between them translated into over 26 languages. He is a recipient of the Royal Society Faraday Medal, the Institute of Physics Kelvin Medal, and the Stephen Hawking Medal. There was too much to say, so I skipped a lot, sorry for that, but it's time to talk about Le gioie della scienza. The original title is The Joy of Science, and today's world is unpredictable and full of contradictions. Making the decisions is far from easy. The Joy of Science presents 8 short lessons on how to unlock the clarity, empowerment, and joy of thinking and living a little more scientifically. I leave the floor to Jim and Marilù to discuss the book. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Marilù.
Thank you, Chiara. And let me thank on my Jim for being with us. It is really a privilege and a pleasure. I say that it is a joy. Because one of the things that really has been reading your book has been precisely the use of this word in the title. It is the word joy, but you will, to the students who maybe have already read the book or are going to, so I'm sure it will be a wonderful reading. There are other words like that, because one other is beauty, very much used, that Jim uses very much, and also wonder of science. And I was very happy to read these words, because one of the things that certainly we can say about science is that science as a norm generates. This is something that Jim faces in his book, in one of the chapters in particular, and it is a powerful connector between reality and abstraction. Really, science and challenge that Jim is proposing to us, not only science, every citizen learns how to use scientific thinking to read reality, keep details, global vision together, and use also a highly dense language. Jim dedicates one full chapter about science, no absolutely right or false statements, and errors are part of the process, and actually make perfection somehow the process, and the fact that progress is a collective climbing of science shoulder. This is what we could say of ancient Greek statement. So all this said, I would first like to ask Jim about how he came this idea of associating science to joy, to beauty, and the fact that according to what usually people think science is maybe squared, very framed, but instead there is all this creativity that sprouts from everywhere, and this is really the joy of making science.
To you all this afternoon, and great that you've invited me to talk about my book, The Joy of Science. I guess it's obvious to me as a scientist that I love my subject, that I find it inspirational, as you say, Marilù. There's wonder, there's joy, spiritual in trying to understand the world. Not everybody automatically has this love of science. So I wanted to get across this book not just the reason why I find science so inspirational, our curiosity about it, but also why it's a good way to find out about the world. I talk about what is science, because people think science is a collection of facts. The bones in your body, the periodic table of chemical elements, the planets of the solar system. That's not science. It's just knowledge. And there are, I guess, many ways of gaining knowledge, not just science, but maybe through art and literature and culture and meditation and talking to people who know more than you, reading books. But science has this advantage, I think, over other ways of gaining an understanding of the world, because science isn't a collection of facts, it's a process. And I think for me, this book is about how we understand the process of science, what we call the scientific method. So not only a science joy, not only a science wonderful and reliable way of learning about the world, it's also a way of rationalizing, which I try to explain could actually be very useful outside science, more broadly, in today's world of social media and polarization, ideologies, and everybody shouting, all the data and information we receive, all the time. What do you believe? Who do you listen to? The way we do science is probably a reliable way of, I think, helping people progress through their daily life. So that's the motivation for the book.
Yes, indeed, you have dedicated in this book a really special room to discuss the importance of scientific thinking, so as a way of thinking for future scaffolding. So the fact that for us to be citizens who are able to see the world and also then to act, and so deep connection between this and our time with science or with the arts. The fact that one thing that I found quite interesting is that you have been also speaking the fact that it's not so much important to be specialized in disciplines, which of course it is important if you want to do research on those, that's clear. But it's not only specializing in disciplines, but it's specializing in the desire of driving on curiosity and to look at things in an innovative manner.
Yes, I think, students may want to study science in school or university, maybe because it's important. This is a good career choice. You can become a scientist or an engineer, and there are many problems and challenges we face in the world today. So it's a useful. The skills of science are very useful. The knowledge of the scientific knowledge that we gain to develop new technologies is very useful. But learning about how the world is, it can so just be for the sake of it, because what I've always tried to do as a science communicator for many years now is to embed science in popular culture. When you are with friends, in a coffee shop or down in the evening chatting with colleagues, you talk about politics, we talk about sport, we talk about music, we talk about art. Why not talk about science as well? The way we understand the world can be just as exciting, just as inspiring as anything else in the arts, for example. So having science as part of the general conversation is also a good reason for wanting to study the subject, not just because it's useful, but because we have this desire to learn more as a human species.
And this is something that I think this is one of the deep reasons why I think that the book can be especially to the students who are reading it and evaluating, because this is really something about them and what they are thinking to do in their future, that maybe something that has to do with the career in science, but they certainly can use scientific thinking for whatever they wish to do in science. And one other thing that I found quite interesting in your reading in the book is about the kind of questions that one can ask, driven by this curiosity. So one way I try to say things in this manner. So you have kind of identified a place where scientists and citizens meet. Let's say this way. Scientists, of course, they are driven by their curiosity. They try to push the limits of their knowledge with scientific methods and so forth. But there is a field where they meet also the curiosities of citizens, and the curiosities of citizens often are also driven by some beliefs that maybe are wrong, maybe are true. But what does it mean, wrong and true in science? So this is a nice place where we all meet and where we can drive some advancement.
Yes, I think what we call the scientific method has been a very reliable way for scientists to learn about the world, but it's actually more useful than that, because, as you say, the way we do science, the way we evaluate evidence, the way we examine our own biases, what is reliable information, what isn't, we learn how to do this. We're trained how to do this in science. And I think it would be very useful for the wider society to learn more about these methods, these techniques, not to learn about scientific subjects, but just to carry on our daily lives. The one example I often give is that in science, it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, it's encouraged to make mistakes. And not a bad thing to make mistakes. If we didn't make mistakes, we would not learn. We would still believed originally. So it's empowering to make mistakes and to admit that we have made mistakes. You can say, well, sorry, I was wrong. I thought this, but now I have more evidence, more data. Now I have changed my mind. I think something else. And it's okay. Imagine the situation in politics. Imagine if a politician could say, I believe this, but now I've changed my mind. I think something else. We'd all criticize them. We say, these politicians, they know everything. They've changed their mind. This is a sign of weakness. Of course, in science, it's the opposite. So things like that, admitting your mistakes, admitting that we are never certain about things, that certainty is not a good thing. We have to always have doubts and careful analysis, because it may be that we're wrong. I think those sorts of attitudes could be very useful for everybody, in fact, in society.
That indeed is something about also ideology, so being logic that you discuss in your book. And if scientists can sometimes be ideologic, even though we should not, and it happens also that citizens, they have their beliefs. You discuss about, for example, who still thinks that the earth is flat and things like that. If everyone keeps his or her own belief, then of course there is no way of meeting up. So you talked about the importance of making errors, mistakes, and that science proceeds this way. Then you talk also about other two trends of scientific thinking that are, and also actually the scientific method. So the fact that the possibility of demonstrating something is false, so that are falsifiable, and also theories and results must be repeatable. Can you give some examples for our students about what you mean by this?
Yes, I think particularly these days, there are people who will believe things that we know scientifically there isn't good evidence for. The conspiracy theories, the belief that the Earth is flat, or that we never went to the moon, or that the world was created a few thousand years ago. But the people who believe this, as you say, they may be ideologically driven, maybe politically, religious motivations, whatever. They think they are being rational. They think they have equal right to hold that view as somebody on the opposite side. I always say the difference between a scientific theory and a conspiracy theory is, if you ask a conspiracy theorist, what could I present to you as evidence that would make you change your mind, that would convince you that you're wrong? And I think they would have to admit that nothing would. By definition, a conspiracy theorist will believe what they believe regardless of the evidence. They either dismiss the evidence, or maybe they twist it and use it to somehow support their own ideological view. In science, it's not like that. In science, we can change our minds if we get new evidence. I don't know what it was like in Italy, the beginning of the pandemic, but in the UK, before we understood how the COVID virus was transmitted, we were told you have to wash your hands. And this is what you have to do. And in fact, the public, advice given by government was, you wash your hands and you sing happy birthday twice. So because that gives us about 30 seconds or so, enough time to really wash your hands very well. If you do that, you should be okay. Of course, by the summer of 2020, it was realized that the COVID virus is transmitted through the air, that it's such a small virus, it can remain suspended in the air for a long time. And so much washing your hands, although that's actually still good advice, but you have to wear a mask, you have to be socially distant, you have to open windows if you're inside. And many people said, You scientists, you don't know anything. You were telling us we have to wash our hands. Now you tell us we have to wear a mask. Make up your minds what you want. And you have to explain, this is how science works. Given the information we had in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't understand how the virus was transmitted. As we gather more data, more evidence, we realize that we have to modify our view. And I think that is a really important lesson. If you receive new information, reliable evidence, you have to be prepared to change your mind. It may be uncomfortable. Ideologically, you may not want to hear something that agrees with your views. Psychologically, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. But yes, sure, scientists also have biases, also have ideological motives. Maybe a scientist has a theory and they publish their paper and then realize they're wrong. They want to keep promoting, they have their reputation, they want to get promotion in their university or their organization. They want the respectability from their colleagues. So they may resist this changing your mind, because scientists are humans. We also have our the same traits as everybody else. But the scientific method broadly tends to correct for this. If a scientist holds a wrong view that is shown by evidence, whether it's theory, whether it's observational data, whatever, shown to be wrong, then in the end, the truth will come out, and they will have to alter their views. That's the big difference, I think.
Yes, I know. Indeed, one of the other comments you made, I think you talked about precisely, also still speaking about the pandemic. I think that one other lesson has been about the fact that our capability and literacy, say mathematical literacy, is often missing. You also cite, make a citation from Spiegelhalter, who was, by the way, a winner of one of our Cosmos Prize awards, that is predicting factors of person's existence to transformations to is their math competence. So this is one other thing, and also one other that you consider, and on which I would like to have your comment, is about the relationship between science and politics, the way scientists, they advise politicians to address their policies, and how much for science is important to have a responsible approach, right? So open data, governance, education, ethics. You talk a lot about ethics in science.
Yes, I think first of all, we have to understand that politicians, certainly in democracies, politicians are the people who have been elected by the public. They are the ones who have to implement policies and big decisions. The scientist's job is to advise, give them the explanation of a particular technology, and then the politicians, of course, have to be the ones who make the decision. But it is important that the politicians, they don't have to all be, we don't want politicians to all be scientists. Right? That would be probably not very great for us scientists, but for the rest of society, you need politicians to have backgrounds in history and economics, in other disciplines, of course. But I think it's important that politicians understand how science works. So they need to understand the science itself. They don't need to have scientific knowledge, the expertise to tell them that. But they need to understand how it works. They can listen to this advice. Of course, they have to balance, policy depend on science, but also depend on economics. It may depend on public acceptability. It may depend on many other factors that politicians have to weigh up. But at least if they understand the process of science, why we feel this is the correct thing to do, why we believe this is the way the world is, then I think that is very important. But from the scientist's point of view, you know, as you say, we have to make sure that the science, the technology is transparent. We need to make sure that it's explained. We need to make sure the public are involved in a dialogue. It's not just the public are ignorant people and we scientists are very clever and we will tell them the truth about the world and what they should do. No, there needs to be a dialogue and engagement with the public. The public will have concerns. And of course, and we know this, we see this now with many areas in science, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, how we tackle climate change. There are many ethical implications that we need as a society to address that is outside of the scientific gathering of knowledge. And scientists have to be aware that there's more than just the facts about the world. There are the implications of that, what that means to society, has to also be taken into account.
Yes. So while I invite students to start their processing of questions, we have some more time for a couple of questions from this side. And indeed, one is a question that can be quite useful to students, and actually I found very useful also for myself. So in Jim's book, so after this beautiful introduction about scientific thinking and this introductory chapter, then there are a series of chapters where in each one of them he takes a lesson from a specific context where science is played. And one of these is about, so the title is, "If you do not understand now, it does not mean that you will ever not." And it is about the fact that in front of difficult things, we might imagine not to be good enough to make science. So about the fact that when we ask questions, they can be stupid, or that if we have a very good memory or logic, then maybe we cannot do other things. So the fact that we can use different kinds of intelligences. So what about it, Jim?
Yes, I think so. One of the things I have been doing for the last 12 years is presenting this radio program on the BBC called Life Scientific, where I interview other scientists. And it's helped me appreciate that science is incredibly broad. It's not just our area of physics, of quantum physics. Science is you don't have to be clever mathematically to do all of science. Science is about lots more than that. And so, you know, I will talk to everything, the guy who studies black holes, the studies autism in children, to the geologist who climbs into a volcano, to the ornithologist who studies birds and sits on a mountain looking at birds nesting. The range of science, and therefore the range of skills needed to do that science, is very, very broad. We have to appreciate that the first thing maybe you need is just to be curious about the world. But then after that, it depends on our personalities, on our strengths. Some people are good at football. Some people are good at music. Some people are good at art. Some people are good at doing mathematics. That doesn't mean if you're not good at mathematics, you can't do science. Because it's so varied, I think lots of different skills would be useful. You can pick the science the discipline, the area of science that matches your personality, drives your passion.
Short breaking of the connection. So
I said something very interesting that you may have.
Oh, I missed it. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry Jim. Yeah, anyway, I want, precisely speaking about this beauty of science, meaning, as you said, in the part I could hear, that you met while broadcasting one of your very interesting programs, different scientists, and so checking and seeing how much diverse and beautiful is science. I ask you then a question that is really at my heart, about something that is quite interdisciplinary. And for the student, you should know that Jim is okay. You know that he's irrational about what he says, but in particular, he is a groundbreaker because he is one of the persons, the scientists, who has opened the wonderful field of quantum biology that has some controversies, right? So it is one of those where curiosity, inspiration, broad view, interdisciplinarity are really wonderful values. And so can you tell us a bit about what it is? And
yes, so quantum biology, I mean, it has a long history, going back all the way back to the founding fathers of quantum mechanics, like Niels Bohr in Copenhagen in the late 1920s. The idea is that if a physics student or chemistry student at university, you taught quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics, the theory of the microscopic world, how atoms and subatomic particles behave, and it's a very different world from the one of large everyday experience. But and strange, and I'm sure many of you students will at least have heard something about atoms in two places at the same time and behaving in a very strange way. But this is what happens in the subatomic world. But biologists typically haven't had to study quantum mechanics. They haven't needed to. However, in molecular biology, we are talking about the world of the very small, the world at the level of molecules, atoms. The question is there some quantum phenomena happening there? Now, quantum biology isn't, well, life is made of atoms and atoms are quantum, therefore life is quantum. Of course, everything is quantum at some level. But what we have discovered in recent years is there are certain phenomena, certain mechanisms inside living cells that only seem possible to be explained if we use quantum mechanics. It's a small field, it's new, as Marilù says, it's still somewhat controversial. Physicists don't like biology because biology is complicated, it's difficult. Biologists don't like quantum mechanics because they haven't studied it, and it's very mathematical. And the chemists who sit in the middle between physics and biology say, why are you inventing a new field? Everything is quantum. Biology, in the end, is chemistry. Chemistry has to have quantum mechanics. It's more than that. So the research that I'm doing, I work with computational chemists, with molecular biologists. As a theoretical physicist, it is interdisciplinary. We're studying things like the hydrogen bonds between DNA, strands of DNA. Hydrogen bond is a proton, and that proton can jump from one DNA strand to another in the double helix. How that proton transfers seems to require quantum tunneling, one of the mechanisms in the quantum world. This is true. A proton transfers from one site to the other. That can lead to a mutation. So it's an important question, so important that we need to know the answer. Maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe it's not important. But I find this very fascinating that I'm applying my knowledge of the quantum world. My original field of research is nuclear physics. Inside the nuclear atom, everything is quantum. You can't escape quantum mechanics. But applying quantum rules inside living cells is new. and it's fascinating, and I'm finding it very exciting. We just have to be careful that we don't use quantum mechanics to as an excuse to explain everything, because that would be very dangerous. You can't say, quantum mechanics is mysterious, consciousness is mysterious, therefore the consciousness is quantum. Because then you say, telepathy must be quantum, homeopathy must be quantum. And suddenly we move away from science into pseudoscience. So we have to be careful how we develop this new interdisciplinary field.
One of the things that comes out from this kind of research is this change of paradigm, according to which maybe, so one of the ideas is maybe nature has found none to use quantum mechanics, which is a kind of more clever than we do with our quantum computers.
Of course. Well, nature's had 3.5 billion years to find the most efficient way to do something. If quantum mechanics gives nature an advantage, it'll use it. It's not magic.
Indeed. Okay, so Chiara, do we have questions from the chat at the moment, or we can go forward? We can't hear you. Yeah, now yes, we do.
So maybe I can just in and maybe ask one question actually to both of you, both Jim and Marilù. I'd be interested in your opinion. Jim, you were talking about this dialogue between science and society in general, and you argue, of course, that it is important for the general public to embrace science. Wonderful, John, his book in explaining why it's important to embrace science. I wanted to look at this dialogue in a slightly different way, maybe in a slightly provocative way, if I may, which is that on the other hand, also on the other side of the dialogue, there are many of our scientists that are often maybe not quite ready to engage in this dialogue. You know, most of our colleagues, you're certainly very well aware of this. They live in, they work in a very hyper specialized fields, and quite frankly, very often they're not quite prepared to discussions with the general public. Now, you of course are a celebrated communicator, but my question to you and also to Marilù, whether you feel we have a problem in the way we prepare our scientists, and more in general, as we encourage the general public to embrace science, should we also encourage maybe scientists to maybe broaden their formation and also learn how to communicate, get out of their ivory towers, so to say, and be prepared to interact with the general public?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly it's happening very quickly now in the United Kingdom. Students are encouraged as part of their training as scientists, not just to learn the science, but to learn how to explain it to others, how to communicate it. The reason why I enjoyed science communication is because I always felt very strongly, if I learn something interesting, something exciting about the world, why would I want to keep it to myself? Only publish it in a paper that maybe 10 people will read around the world. Why don't I want to stand on the roof and shout and tell anybody who would listen about it? Now, of course, you're right. Not every scientist has the personality or the desire to talk to a journalist, to write a popular science book, or talk to school kids, about their work in a non-technical way. And that's absolutely fine. There's enough space, enough room in science for those who want to dedicate themselves only to staying in their ivory towers that's good, because we need people like that, in the same way that we need people to specialize in a very narrow area and dig deep in that very narrow area. But we also need people to try and make connections between different areas, interdisciplinary science. I think it's not just one type of scientist that's needed, but we should make sure that those who want to communicate what they do are encouraged, that is not seen as somehow not a respectable thing to do. I will tell you a very quick story. When I first started as a science communicator, and I've published, I think, my first or second popular science book, I was introduced by a colleague at a conference. This is Al-Khalili. He used to be a physicist. He said it as a joke, but I knew what he meant, that somehow I had betrayed my discipline by becoming a communicator. But I was still, going to conference, still publishing, I'm still doing my research. And I think that attitude has now changed in the UK. People see the importance of communicating, of active scientists communicating. So these are not science communicators, but scientists who communicate. And I think that should be encouraged.
Well, I really appreciate this question, because it got at the heart of a new kind of research that I just started. Because actually, what I found, I've always been very happy about doing science communication. I mean, popularization and stuff like that. But then when I started working also in the field of physics education research, that it is quite different from outreach. One of the immediate things that I realized when discussing with the colleagues of physics education research is that outreach is considered, again, not something that has a rigor. And so what I think we should do is not only to train young scientists, if they wish, because Jim is perfectly right, not everyone should do everything. But so if they wish to, the basic concepts and tools to communicate difficult things, getting around the problem of the language, because this is after all the main problem. But we should also make research on how to design tools for outreaching citizens, and also how to assess the way we do it, so that we can, like in any scientific thinking process, we can learn from the mistakes and make things better. So we should actually make this an active field of research, besides, of course, all the rest. This is so important for all the reasons that Jim said, and also he discussed very well in his book, about, for example, if a scientist asks to advise a politician who didn't have any kind of scientific study. So there are two problems here. One is that if science is not studied with the useful tools since one is a kid, then the politician who didn't study science will have problems in understanding what the science is saying. And if the scientist is not even able to communicate in a simple manner the things he or she is expert of, then there is really a non-communication, and actually can be even worse. Because things that are said, we saw it during the pandemic, they are understood in a completely different manner. And citizens on the one side, they don't trust scientists any longer. They don't trust the politicians, and who wins? Those who think that the earth is flat. That this is a huge problem that we have, that goes at the heart of the responsible research innovation. And it is not just doing this just by a case, in a fortuitous manners. We really have to think and somehow also formalize the way we do. And also, if I can add one thing, the other point is that we also have to spend money, because it's doing good popularization requires competencies, of course. Sometimes it also requires tools that can be costly and expensive, and it is better to do the things well, the rigorous ones, instead of doing many small things that maybe they do not work, not even if you put them all together.
So, Gianfranco,
Yeah,
would you like to add
if we have just one more
something
minute,
else?
if we have just maybe one more minute, unless we need to really close now, Chiara, I just wanted to add just one extra notes, which is connected to my question that I was just asking, because we talked about the communication aspects right now, and I think I've appreciated both of your answers, but there's another aspect maybe which is also connected that we probably cannot solve in this conversation today. But my question is also that sometimes scientists they have almost well, at least some scientists have almost a caricatural understanding of science themselves. And what I mean with that is that we often hear scientists around, even public events, by saying we have the scientific method, we are the only ones that can sort things out and figure out what is the truth, and so on and so forth. And what I'm thinking is that maybe having a little more formation on the philosophy of science, the history of science, or philosophy and history in general, actually, might even help this dialogue with
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly to know your own subject, often we say as academics, you only really learn the subject when you have to teach it. You're forced to fill the gaps in your knowledge. But you're also right. Scientists can be very arrogant in believing that somehow we have all the answers. We are best qualified not only to have the answers but to ask the questions. And I think this is where it's very important that we work with philosophers of science, with historians of science. You're absolutely right. The context of what we're doing, why we're doing it, is vitally important. I work currently on a research project with 3 philosophers, and I find it very, very refreshing because they will focus our attention on what is important. They may not have the scientific knowledge to answer the questions, but they pose the questions in a way that I think scientists find very, very useful. Understanding the concept, the context of how we do science is very important, rather than just carrying out the research and gathering information and data.
Thank you.
And if I can add one very rapid, very quick consideration, there is also the caricatural way of looking at science. It also comes from the fact that we have fixated for too long an image of a picture of the scientist who is well defined. I mean, also Jim says, I use your words, Jim. So
Sure,
a white male from the Western world. If we don't take also account of the wonderful per se diversity of scientists around the world, and also gender diversity and all this, it is hard to make citizens interested because they are diverse as well. And so this is one other point that I think we should be very, very careful about.
Okay, thank you. But I must say that you all manage to communicate the joy of science. So thank you so much, Jim, Marilù, and Gianfranco. If you would like to add something else, otherwise I can conclude.
Yeah, I think Jim has to leave now. So thanks again Thanks again to Jim for being here, and thanks a lot, Marilù, as well.
So, thank you so
Thank
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilù, for the nice questions.
Marilù, thanks, Gianfranco. I just take 2 minutes because we are at the end of this meeting, but also this was the last digital event of Premio Cosmos for the students. We had the pleasure of interesting talks that touched not only on scientific topics, but also on important topical issues, artificial intelligence, environmental issues, and the complexity of the world, and the need to rely on science to find answers to so many questions. Today we learn also that we can make mistakes and we can change our mind, and we discovered the joy of science. So thank you. The authors of the finalist books accepted the direct confrontation with the students, answered the question and simulated new ones. The Città Metropolitana is very proud of these initiatives. It becomes more interesting and more stimulating every year. We want to say thanks to the member of the scientific committee who spoke with the authors, to President Gianfranco, who saw the preparation of each meeting, to the authors and publishers who were always available, and Pythagoras, Angela Misiano, Monica Rosario, and to the partners, Ministero dell'Istruzione and Ministero degli Affari Esteri. But above all, we have to say thanks to the schools, the teachers, the students, because they animated these meetings with their questions and their presence. The Cosmos Prize is a success, yes, for Città Metropolitana, but we know it's a success if it is able to stimulate new questions and open the minds of new generation. These meetings have made us realize how science is not just formulas and numbers, but how it is capable of providing answers to real and current problems. The next appointment for you guys is next Saturday with the students' assembly at the Planetarium of Reggio Calabria. I want to mention books once again. L'intelligenza artificiale, una guida per esseri umani pensanti, Melanie Mitchell, published by Einaudi, translated by Silvio Ferraresi. Rosalind Franklin, Ho fotografato il DNA, Paola Cadelli, published by Morellini. L'alfabeto della natura, Roberto Battistone, published by Rizzoli. Non siamo soli, Abraham Loeb, published by Mondadori e translated by Cannillo. Le gioie della scienza, Jim Al-Khalili, edito da Bollati Boringhieri, translated by Laura Semidei. We are certain that it will not be easy to choose the winning book, because they have only inspired us from different perspectives. I need to bring greetings from Sindaco Versace, Consigliere Quartuccio, and Dirigente Attanasio. So I can close. Good luck, good work from all of us. See you soon, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Jim.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Marilù. Bye.